Here's what's coming up on the world today. The World Health Organization says half of Europe will be infected with the Omicron variant of COVID-19 within the next 6-8 weeks. Further investigations ongoing into tennis #1 Novak Djokovic's travel entry form into Australia. Plus, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson under fire for garden party in May 2020. A warm welcome to the program today. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin with a warning from the World Health Organization for Europe that half of the continent will have been infected with the Omicron variant of COVID-19 within 6 to 8 weeks. The Global Health Body's Regional Director for Europe, Dr. Hans Kluge, says the tidal wave of Omicron is sweeping across the region on top of the surge of the Delta variant already present. Europe saw more than 7 million newly reported COVID-19 cases in the first week of 2022, more than doubling over a 2-week period. The World Health Organization warns that more than half of the region's population are expected to be infected with the Omicron variant within the next 6 to 8 weeks.
The Omicron variant represents a new west to east tidal wave, sweeping across the region on top of the Delta surge that all countries were managing until late 2021. How each country now responds must be informed by its epidemiological situation, available resources, vaccination uptake status, and socio-economic context. The region saw over 7 million newly reported cases of COVID-19 in the first week of 2022, more than doubling over a 2-week period.
France's health ministry has reported a record of more than 350,000 new COVID infections over a 24-hour period. The previous record of 332,252 daily new cases was set on January the 5th, and since then, France has seen 2 more days of more than 300,000 new cases over 24 hours as the highly contagious Omicron has become the dominant variant. Hong Kong has announced plans to shut kindergartens and primary schools and start offering COVID-19 vaccines from children from the age of 5 as the financial hub grapples with an increase in coronavirus infections. China's Tianjin and Zhengzhou have implemented tough new restrictions as they battle the highly contagious Omicron variant. Tianjin has imposed travel restrictions and has launched a mass testing program to help prevent the variant from spreading. Zhengzhou, the provincial capital of Henan province, has also shut non-essential public facilities. Pakistan's largest city, Karachi, has launched a door-to-door campaign to vaccinate women who are lagging behind men in rates of coronavirus inoculation as the country enters a 5th wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. The country reported 1,467 cases over the past 24 hours. On Friday, it reported nearly 1,300 cases in a single day, its highest tally in 2 months, with a positivity rate of 2.5%. The government has not yet announced new restrictions, but has urged people to follow precautionary measures. And finally, thousands of people were seen shopping in crowded markets across India this week as the country battles a sharp rise in COVID-19 cases. The fast-spreading Omicron variant has fueled an almost 8-fold rise in daily infections in the country since the start of the year. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under fire following his garden party back in May 2020, attended by about 100 people. The Prime Minister had reportedly told staff members to bring their own booze, which is alcohol. Lawmakers have been arguing about whether or not he will continue as Prime Minister. The garden party is said to be the latest scandal rocking Mr. Johnson's office. Sources say Downing Street staff members attended the gathering with Carrie Johnson in the flat where she and the Prime Minister live. The 100 people were invited by email to socially distanced drinks. The Conservative Party admitted that unauthorised gathering took place at its headquarters in Westminster. Multiple sources also say there was a Christmas quiz for Number 10 staff last year, with a photo published by the Sunday Mirror showing Boris Johnson taking part and sitting between two colleagues in Number 10. Lawmakers say Johnson has lost all authority on the issue of COVID restrictions, lied to Parliament and lied to the public.
It's an entirely hypothetical position. He seeks to draw me. The Prime Minister's going nowhere. He seeks to draw me into making a supposition about the result of any inquiry. But the Prime Minister retains the confidence of the people of this country, and he did so 2 years ago with the biggest majority in decades. As I did then, Mr. Speaker, I apologise again, unreservedly, for the upset that these allegations have caused. The Prime Minister has asked for an investigation to take place, and the terms of reference for the investigations that are underway have already been published here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question, and it is incredibly disappointing but not unsurprising that the Prime Minister, of whom I asked this question, is not here today, despite not having any official engagements. And I think, Mr. Speaker, his absence speaks volumes, as does his smirks on the media. The public have already drawn their own conclusions. He can run, but he can't hide.
Well, still following updates on the controversy surrounding tennis number one Novak Djokovic's participation in the Australian Open. And it appears that still hangs in the balance as Australian border officials are investigating whether his travel entry form included a false declaration. Djokovic's form stated he had not travelled in the 14 days before his arrival on January the 6th, while social media posts appear to show him in both Serbia and Spain during the fortnight. He told border officials that Tennis Australia had completed the travel declaration on his behalf. It's not clear whether this would help him in the event if it's challenged. Djokovic's visa was revoked on arrival in Melbourne last week before being reinstated by a judge on Monday. He's open to defend his title next week, but Australia's immigration minister still has powers to recancel the visa and deport him. Well, let's speak to immigration lawyer Dayo Fadina. Dayo Fadina, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure, Tony. Thank you.
What would be the implication of Novak Djokovic if he lied about this travel history on the travel form?
Anyway, thank you very much. Good evening. Look, the situation to do with Djokovic right now is this. If it's the case that he lied or made a false declaration as, on the travel documents that particularly to do with the exemption and the fact that he had not, his travel history, that he had not actually traveled anywhere. If that's the case, what that would mean is that it would be in breach. It would have been in breach of any immigration, of the immigration rules, Australian immigration rules. And this actually applies to every single country all over the world. When you give false representation or a false statement, and any immigration officer should find out, what normally would happen is a visa or your leave to remain or leave to enter any country could be rejected and refused. So I would not be quite surprised if it's the case that the immigration office in Australia would conclude that, well, we still need to cancel this very particular visa because he actually lied to the authorities when he was completing the relevant forms.
Mr. Fadino, on the one hand, you have Australian immigration, which could still cancel Djokovic's visa, like you mentioned. And on the other hand is the court, which cleared him and puts the blame on the Tennis Federation, not explaining to him what the rules are. Do you think Djokovic came into Australia innocent of the rules and encouraged by tennis officials because of his status as tennis #1? What are your thoughts?
Well, what I think about that very particular issue of actually coming in innocent of the rules of the Australian immigration rules and regulations, I don't believe that would wash with anybody at all. We are aware of the fact that Djokovic is unvaccinated. He has always been a rebel against vaccination. So it would be very, very surprising if the world #1 tennis player was not truly and really aware of the rules when it was coming in. That's the first point. The second point is to do with the reason why the courts, decided to release him. And the courts decided the order that he should be released, not because of what is going on in between him and the immigration office and the Tennis Australia. It was actually released because the judge was of the strong opinion that he was not given enough time to explain his situation before he was detained, and that what the immigration authorities did to him was quite unfair. That was the main reason why he was released and nothing else.
We also have to remember that Australia has one of the toughest COVID-19 protocols. With all these new informations that have come up, the pictures on social media showing him in Spain, how do you think this could go for him and, of course, for the government?
Well, again, if it's the case that, as I explained earlier, that he lied or that he lied that he had not traveled anywhere in 14 days before he traveled to Australia, the situation would be quite dire. Dire in the sense that the Australian authorities, if it's the case that the Tennis Australia facilitated a situation where he could come into Australia to play tennis, and were aware of the fact that it could be risky for him to actually be coming in because of the situation that he was in a few weeks ago. The Tennis Australia and the government would at least have to actually account for why that was the case in the first place. And what I would think and what I would believe should happen is just to apply a little bit of common sense here, straightforward common sense, and then apply that doctrine of Metron Ariston, which is, moderation. You could actually meet and resolve this problem in the middle way approach of resolving this problem by one, allowing him to play tennis, because that was why he actually came into Australia. Two, ensure that for every single day is to play tennis, he would be checked as to whether he's COVID-free. And then three, allow the government to at least come out of all this and not be too embarrassed and too ashamed about the fact that they created this problem in the first place and they allowed him to come in the first place. Because he was given the assurance that he had an exemption certificate, hence the reason why he came in, not his fault. Whether he actually knew that he was not entitled to come to Australia at all, that's not the case at all. The fact remains that the government allowed him to come in. So at least a middle way situation should be applied there to resolve the problem altogether.
All right, then, immigration lawyer, Mr. Dayo Fadino, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Tenny. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Still ahead on the program. Man becomes first person in the world to get a heart transplant from a genetically modified pig. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Two more somber news in Europe as tributes pour in from leaders and politicians across the region over the death of European Parliament President David Sassoli. The 65-year-old had been admitted to hospital last month because of a serious complication related to his immune system. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said the union had lost a passionate European. French President Emmanuel Macron and the EU Council chief, Charles Michel, expressed their condolences to the family, and Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi has also paid tribute during a speech to the lower house of parliament earlier today. Sassoli was born in Florence in 1956 but moved to Rome as a young child. He started as a newspaper journalist before joining Italian state broadcaster Rai, where he became a household name, delivering the main evening news. He switched to politics in 2009, joining the centre-left Democratic Party, and easily won election to the European Parliament. After a failed bid to become mayor of Rome, he focused on EU politics. Well, are you wondering about world economy? Only 1 in 10 World Economic Forum members surveyed expects the global recovery to accelerate over the next 3 years, with only 1 in 6 optimistic about the world outlook. Climate change was seen as the #1 danger by respondents in the WEF's annual risk report, while erosion of social cohesion, livelihood crisis and mental health deterioration were identified as risks which had increased the most since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. WEF Managing Director Sadia Zahidi says government must adopt a stance that would shift from the emergency stance that many governments have had, and all of the stimulus funding that has been provided shifting towards more of a recovery stance and more of a resilience stance that puts into place investments for the future.
Together, the Global Risks Initiative team.
The Global Risk Report highlights that in the next 5 to 10 years, climate action failure and the environmental risk it brings, namely extreme weather events, are perceived to be the most critical long-term threats to the world. One of the important long-term consequences of the pandemic is the effect it will have on the world's ability to address these important global environmental challenges, reducing the attention and focus needed for governments to take effective and quick climate action, halving greenhouse gas emissions in the next decade and achieving the net zero transition by 2050, or risking massive disruption from the consequences of a materially warmer climate.
Do you mind which heart beats inside you? Well, a 57-year-old David Bennett is making history as the first man in the world to get a heart transplant from a genetically modified pig. Doctors say he's doing well after the 7-hour procedure.
In a world's first, a terminally ill man in the U.S. has received a heart transplant from a genetically modified pig. Doctors say 57-year-old David Bennett of Maryland is doing well 3 days after the experimental procedure. The surgery took 7 hours and was performed by a team at the University of Maryland Medicine. It was seen as the last hope for Bennett, who'd been suffering from terminal heart disease. That meant doctors were able to receive an emergency authorization for the operation from the FDA.
He's awake. He is recovering and speaking to his caregivers. And we hope that the recovery that he is having now will continue. We've never done this in a human, and I like to think that we have given him a better option than what continuing his therapy would have been. But whether it's a day, week, month, year, I don't know.
The pig's heart was provided by Revivacor, a regenerative medicine company based in Virginia. Prior efforts as pig-to-human transplants have failed because of genetic differences that caused organ rejection or viruses that posed an infection risk. Scientists have tackled that problem by editing away potentially harmful genes.
Probably the biggest risk is now. We seem to be past what we consider the hyperacute rejection phase that we would normally have seen in an animal organ that wasn't specially treated. So we feel good about that one. So we're preparing for the next attack on his organ. We know that the pig heart will be attacked by different soldiers in our body. Different immune players can take it out, and we have designed a treatment plan in addition to the humanized, genetically edited heart to try to account for that.
If the surgery ends up being a success, scientists hope pig organs could help alleviate shortages of donor organs. According to government statistics, there are about 11,000 Americans currently waiting for an organ transplant, and more than 6,000 patients die each year before getting one.
Incredible stuff. And now reactions are still trailing ECOWAS leaders' announcement of additional sanctions on Mali's military leaders. The country's interim president, Assimi Goïta, says despite not shifting ground, he is open to dialogue with leaders.
Mali's interim president, Assimi Goïta, is one of several colonels who overthrew President Boubacar Ibrahim Keïta in August 2020. He called the ECOWAS sanctions illegal and inhumane, but says he remains open to dialogue with the regional body.
I have to say that even if we regret the illegal and inhumane nature of some decisions, Mali remains open to dialogue with ECOWAS in order to find a consensus between the interests of the Malian people and the respect of the organization's fundamental principles.
The fresh ECOWAS measures represent a significant hardening of its stance towards Mali, whose interim authorities have proposed holding elections in December 2025 instead of this February as originally agreed with the bloc. Assimi Goïta is now calling on all Malians to unite and act as defenders of the nation in the face of sanctions.
It is regrettable that the efforts of the transitional government were ignored. Fellow countrymen, it is time for all Malians to unite to express and affirm our principles and defend our nation. Every Malian, wherever he or she is, has to act as a defender of the superior interest of Mali.
However, residents in Bamako on Monday shrugged off the sanctions, saying they supported the government's strategy.
Let them take other measures worse than the current sanctions. We will continue to support Assimi Goïta. I ask all Malians to unite for our full independence.
Whatever the sanctions, we really have to accept them. We cannot be independent without suffering. We have to accept the suffering. That is my will. I ask all Malians truly to accept sanctions, even though it is hard. We must accept it in order to achieve the desired objective, which is the total liberation of Mali and the whole of Africa.
In a communique issued after an emergency summit in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, ECOWAS said it found the proposed timetable for a transition back to constitutional rule totally unacceptable. The organization agreed to impose additional sanctions with immediate effect. These included the closure of members' land and air borders with Mali, the suspension of non-essential financial transactions, the freezing of Malian state assets in ECOWAS commercial banks, and recalling their ambassadors from Bamako.
In Harbin, capital of northeast China's Heilongjiang province, a top winter tourist destination now brims with winter sports elements in the run-up to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games. Well, these include Olympic-themed light shows, installation arts, as well as a range of ice and snow sculptures located in the Harbin Ice Snow World. The most stunning one is a tower-shaped ice sculpture standing in the center of the park, which has attracted numerous visitors from both local and other places. Another giant snow sculpture featuring the mascot of Beijing 2022 Olympic Winter Games, as well as the mascot of the Paralympic Winter Games has been a major attraction at the Sun Island International Snow Sculpture Art Expo. According to workers, more than 50 artists spent as many as 8 days to construct of the 100-meter long and 30-meter tall sculpture. That's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shaboale.